Well, good evening and welcome to the Robinson Sports Network. I'm here with Coach Up and Coach. That was a close one last week. That was, I'm sure, for a little bit, that was kind of maybe not nerve wracking for you guys, but it was close. But we thought, Will and I were both talking, it was, maybe a trap game in a way. It's kind of like what it was last year, but you guys were able to escape just like last year.
Yeah, I mean, you sit there and talk about a close game, and you still pulled it out by 25. So we were kind of talking about that in the coach's office on Sunday. We were all pretty frustrated. I guess I was more upset with. I just felt like we didn't play very hard for the first half, especially defensively. We kind of let them dictate the physicality and all that kind of stuff. And that credit goes to BB. They played really hard. They had a good scheme. They made plays on defense. And I just thought our kids, for whatever reason, weren't as dialed in as they should be, which, like you said, you can call it a trap game or whatever. But maybe it was kind of good for us to kind of get hit in the mouth and see what we need to work on.
You think that little bit of adversity is probably going to be, worth it for you guys as now you're getting even closer to the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we haven't really been tested, obviously, since Lakeside. And even that game, we kind of felt like we were in control the whole time. So it was good to get, to face a little bit of adversity and like I said, just get hit in the mouth. I think our kids were a little too overconfident. We kind of warned them that the past 2 years with BB has kind of just, for whatever reason, been a really close game. And if we didn't focus right and prepare right, we were going to have some issues. And I didn't feel like we practiced well at all last week. And we knew going in with all the formations and shifts and stuff that they were going to do, that if we weren't locked into it, it was going to give us trouble. And lo and behold, it did. That touchdown right before the half was super frustrating, just because we had went over that formation. We had repped it plenty of times. And, we called right before we called timeout. We were lined up wrong. We called timeout. We still lined up wrong. And so that's super frustrating because it's something that the coaching staff really went in depth on, went as far as us running it in practice. So that way we knew it was done right as the scout team, and still screw it up, but some of that's part of dealing with high school kids, and that's okay.
I got you. Now, obviously, the first half, especially that second quarter, you guys got out to a solid start in the first, and the second quarter slowed down a little bit. And I know those two interceptions on back-to-back drives, I know that hurt. But was Will and I were talking about this in halftime. We kind of imagined that the game plan in the second half would be just give Deuce Williams the football, and was that basically the game plan?
Yeah, I mean, we wanted to throw it a little bit more. Reese struggled a little bit, making some poor decisions. One of them was pretty frustrating because I had told him before the play, like, don't lock on Akeem. Braylon's going to be open, and lo and behold, we lock on Akeem, and thankfully we get a penalty there, but Braylon's running wide open, and we probably score a touchdown there. So that's something where he's got to be better. We were trying not to just run it because we lost an H last week to a foot injury, and so we were really just rolling with Jackson and Lennox, but they're also playing every snap on defense, and so we were trying to get into more 10 personnel look and run it out of that, but we weren't having as much luck with that. And then we just jumped into 12 personnel and said, Deuce, do your thing. And thankfully he did that. Obviously Deuce is a special player. He makes it tough on a lot of people to tackle him and to make plays. And thankfully he had a great night. I thought Trey Petty and Bryshawn Cunningham ran the ball really hard too. I thought Trey had one taken away from him there at the end. I thought the holding call was a little weak. So, they both should have had about 70 yards and a couple touchdowns. So, really proud of our O-line. I thought they did a really good job in the run game.
Now, let's talk a little bit about Searcy. Now, I know this is definitely one of the top games of the week. Hooten's has you picked as the 5A game of the week. And, we've been talking about there's only 3 teams that are undefeated in 5A. You and Cersei are 2 of them. And, we were looking at the stats today. They have a pretty good quarterback. I know last year they had, Curtis Goodrich, and they had a really good ground game. But talk to me about that passing attack.
Yeah, I hadn't, to be honest, I hadn't paid attention to much of them other than the scores, and I peeked in, I guess, look at a couple clips or whatever the last couple weeks, but I hadn't really, paid much attention to it. And then when I was looking at the stats on Saturday, I was, pretty surprised at how well they had thrown the ball. Not, that they're not capable of it or anything, but I just, was kind of caught off guard because, like you said, they ran it pretty well last year. They've done most of their damage to the air this year. They got three receivers who are all about 600, 500 yards, and they all three have, I think, 9, 10, and 11 touchdowns. So they're definitely getting it done through the air, and that starts with the quarterback. He's a sophomore. He's only thrown 2 interceptions, so obviously he's, taking care of the football. He's also their leading rusher. So, he's definitely a priority. Our secondary, we've been pretty hard on them this week. I didn't think they played very physical last week, and we just really did some dumb things back there. So we got to have a really good week in the secondary. Backers have to help us out a little bit this week. And then, I really need our front to really get after the quarterback when they have the opportunity. If he wants to run, we got to make him pay for it. So, it's definitely a different challenge. We haven't really been tested in the passing game over the last 4 or 5 weeks. So, it's just something our kids are going to have to rise to.
Now, I know you said that your team liked a little bit of physicality last week, but I think you got to admit that Tank Reese may not have been one of them. I didn't realize, and it seemed like it all last year. He'd come away just sound. Oh, well, Tank Reese had a quiet game. He pull up the box score. No, he had 15 tackles. Well, no, he had 20 last week, and I know he's been playing banged up, and yet he was still making plays. And Redmond, the same thing. I think he had 12 tackles. So just still great overall play from those guys. Do you think they're going to come up big again against Cersei?
Yeah, I think they're going to have to. Like I said, they're not just running it a whole lot. I don't think they've had the success they want with it. So, they put it through the air. But I think more than anything in the passing game, Jackson and Tank are going to have to play a huge role. We coming into the year, we knew we had 2 of the better linebackers in the state, and they're really just starting to get it rolling. And some of that's because they haven't played more than a first half over the first 3 weeks of conference. And so now they're, last week they finally got to play a little bit. Jackson got back in the end zone, so that was exciting for him. But Tank's leadership, his toughness, just everything about him is such a huge asset to our team. And just such a joy to coach, such a great kid, and he's got to have a big game for us Friday night.
Well, and you spoke about him just a minute ago, Reese Simpson. I mean, I know he struggled last week, and after a really good few weeks, but is he another one of those guys that just he needs to take another step up this against Cersei?
Yeah, 100%. Reese just has to make the easy throws. Sometimes he gets a little too locked in on this route or this receiver on certain concepts, and he's just got to take the easy throws and just be okay with that. Every play doesn't have to be a 60-yard touchdown pass. So really hoping that he can step up in that aspect. We got to get the screen game going some. I thought we did some good things with it last week, but got to be unselfish and block for each other when we do go in the screen game, and then kind of utilize some other types of screens to really get guys going.
Now I know this, BB was one of the games we really didn't see many of the backups, and it's been weeks since we really saw the starters play for most of the game. Do you think that's going to help? Now that I know Pine Bluff is the week after, and then Maumelle obviously is going to be a tough matchup. Do you think that's going to help? Well, especially with the playoffs coming up.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we saw is it was kind of a weird deal. We were expecting it to be a little chillier than it was, and it ended up being kind of muggy. And so I think that zapped us a little more. I mean, we didn't have any cramps or anything like that, but I think guys just were kind of caught off guard with how muggy it was and humid. So I think it was good for us. We started conditioning in the last 2 weeks to just kind of start preparing for guys playing more quarters and more snaps. So I think it was good for us. I think some guys probably, were a little shocked at not necessarily how out of shape they were, but just how much not playing 4 quarters has kind of done to their bodies or their mindset. So definitely something we've got to look at going forward and make sure that we're ready for.
Are there any guys that I've missed talking about that really stood out the last game that you think are probably going to repeat their efforts against Cersei?
I thought Pat played really well on both sides of the ball. He played really hard. Wasn't perfect by any means, but just his ball was outstanding. And that's what one of our coaches told him was thought he's played as hard as he's played in a long time, and it was on both sides of the ball. He at one point I had to go out there and check on him, and I went out there and I thought he rolled his ankle, and we were walking on the field and he said, "Coach, I was just exhausted." And I didn't want you to waste a timeout. But first of all, it's a smart player. Second of all, it was just kind of a testament to how hard he played. I thought Fisher Taylor played really hard too. I think he broke like his third face mask of the season. That stupid Rydell Axiom doesn't. That face mask hates me apparently. But I thought he played really hard. I thought the O line in general played pretty well. But I just want more consistency from the defense, especially. I think we have one of the best back ends in the state, and they just didn't really play like it last week. I don't know what it was, so we've got to get that going. I was glad to see Braylon get a catch or two. I think anytime we want to, we can single some of those guys up and just run a little hitch route, a little stop route, a little curl, and just pick on people if we want to. So maybe look to do that a little more and stuff like that, just to expose the weaknesses that we can get with the matchups that we have.
I got you. Now, a little thing about what I'm doing, just kind of going off topic a little bit. So on Saturday, of course, is the Razorback game against Auburn. Of course, KTV, they're sending me up there to cover the game, and I'll be on the sidelines. So I may be passing by some coaches. Any name drops? I just, maybe anybody you want me to whisper in their ear?
Man, it'd be nice for somebody to give Deuce Williams a little bit of attention. We had a school by today, checking out him and Tank and a couple other kids. My biggest thing is I just want those kids have played so hard. They've put so much good stuff on tape that you can't tell me that they shouldn't be at least playing in the FCS Group of Five level. And I get it. Recruiting has completely changed because of the portal, because of NIL and all this kind of stuff. But, I was talking to Coach the other day, and he was like, 10 years ago, Deuce would have had every Group of Five offer in the country. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. He's a special talent, plays really hard, and Tank he's consistent. He is what he is. He plays really hard. He's super physical and just super heady. He knows the game of football. He gets us lined up, and those two guys are just, special football players. And then, this junior class, when colleges start rolling through, there's a lot to be said about them, whether it be Jaden Todd, Kyron Grimes, Trey Petty, and those guys. They play really hard. So, I have a whole other opinion on college recruiting right now that, I don't want to burn any bridges on, but, just super frustrating because I feel like those kids have earned something special, and they have opportunities, and that's a blessing. I just feel like they should be able to shoot a little higher for the stuff that they've done on the field.
I totally agree. Well, Coach, thank you so much, and we'll send it right back to the field. All right, great, Coach. I appreciate it. Thank you, and yeah, hope it all goes well